I hated the rain. I sat in the cab of the car watching the drops hit the windshield and listening to them drumming on the roof. This was not a nice, soft summer rain. It was a gully washer. When the wind blew, I could see jets of water flooding the parking lot. It wasn't a hurricane, but it was definitely like the newscasts you saw on TV. The air conditioning on the roof of the Heritage Cottage buffet just had to wait for it to stop. There was no way I was going to get up on the roof and work on anything until the weather cleared up. Heck, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Wednesday was my work day in Allentown. Of course, it was an emergency, and I was the most qualified person for the job. In fact, no one else wanted to travel that far on a service contract. The Heritage Cottage buffet is part of the York Holiday House Motel. It was one of the older hotels with an outside entrance, but it made up for it with cheap prices. I think more people used the restaurant than the hotel. Right now, most of the guests were checking out. The maids were under the outside awning, closer to the building to avoid the rain. The wait was long and boring until a beige Volkswagen convertible pulled into one of the nearby parking lots. I couldn't make out the license plate from across the parking lot, but I swear it looked exactly like my wife's Bug. Amanda and I had been married for almost 20 years. We had 2 daughters. Colleen, who had just turned 18 and would be starting full-time school at Kutztown University in 3 months, and Brenda, who had just turned 16 and was now in full-on goth rebellion mode. 2 perfect opposites. Although Amanda and I went to high school together, I really got to know her later in life when she worked as a waitress at a local diner. The time I spent in high school was not the happiest time of my life. For as long as I can remember, I had a terrible stutter, and the teenage angst that accompanied it was horrible. I became withdrawn and moody. I spoke only when necessary, and then usually in as few words as possible. My teachers were ordered to never call me to class. I don't know if that made it easier or harder for me. Most of my classmates thought I had dementia. I never felt that way because I had no reference points. I always knew when I was being taken advantage of or bullied in some way. Sometimes I resorted to physical means to stop certain types of harassment, and it always seemed to work. I was halfway through a technical course on air conditioning repair when I finally got to meet Amanda. In fact, the first time she took my order at the diner was the only time I ever spoke to her. I hadn't dated anyone in high school for obvious reasons, and I had absolutely no social skills to speak of. For over a month, all I did was order food, eat it, and leave. With a generous tip, of course. Amanda was always polite and pleasant. I felt comfortable being around her. It took a lot of courage on my part, but eventually I asked her out on a date, which she readily agreed to. She didn't seem to mind that I let her do all the talking. When I did say something, I tried to speak in one-word sentences. She was well aware of my speech impediment, but tried to intentionally avoid mentioning it in any way. We dated for a few months before things got serious. By that, I mean sexual attraction. The first time it was obvious that I had no experience at all, but she was very understanding and was able to walk us through it without much embarrassment. Although I never mentioned it, I got the distinct feeling that she had done it all before. I really felt that it was her business and that I didn't need to know what she had been doing before meeting me. We had a small civil ceremony right after I graduated from tech school. I had a full-time job waiting for me, and the pay was better than I expected. Amanda continued to work at the diner until she got pregnant with Colleen. From that point on, she became a full-time wife and mom. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Life was good. Just out of curiosity, I kept trying to make out the license plate on the Beatles sign, but the heavy rain made it impossible. A silver Mercedes parked away from the Beetle, and a man with an umbrella got out of it. I was impressed with the way he coordinated traffic. He walked over to the Volkswagen and opened the driver's door. I felt my stomach twist as I watched Amanda get out of the car and hug the man. They half ran, half walked towards the awning of the hotel. They laughed as he closed the umbrella and pulled the room key out of his coat pocket. I sat in the parking lot for over 2 hours. The rain had stopped, but I didn't care. I got out of the car exactly long enough to walk over to the Mercedes and pull the license plate from the glove compartment. Finally, they left the room and, still laughing, headed back to their cars. Before getting into the Volkswagen, Amanda gave her gentleman friend a quick kiss on the cheek. That's how a wife kisses her husband, not her lover. She never noticed my car standing on the other side of the parking lot. She seemed to pay no attention to anything but her companion. I cried as I watched them both leave the parking lot. I still hadn't fixed the air conditioner in the Heritage Cottage buffet. It took less than an hour to get back to the workshop. The boss was upset that I hadn't completed the task, but that was replaced by extreme disappointment when I informed him that I was quitting. He didn't argue with me or demand an explanation. When I got to the bank, I cashed my severance check and withdrew all but $6,000 from various bank accounts. The savings account was to go toward buying a new house, and the money market account held money for the girls' college. Now, they were both empty. As I drove to Kutztown, I realized that Brenda would never get into college. The only thing below her grades was her attitude. I couldn't figure out what I had done that turned her against me, and I was afraid to ask. In fact, she was as confident in her mother as she was in me. Colleen and Brenda had been raised exactly the same, but had become completely different. I felt a small pang of guilt that quickly passed as I paid Colleen's college tuition up front for the full 4 years. It was close enough to home that I didn't have to worry about dorm fees and a meal plan. Amanda was home when I arrived. I took off my wet shoes at the front door as usual. She came out of the kitchen to meet me. "John, what are you doing home at this hour? I thought you were supposed to be in Allentown all day." As I walked past her into the bedroom, I smiled and gave her a quick peck on the cheek, just as she had pecked her lover 3 hours earlier. She looked puzzled when I didn't answer her question. My first bag was half packed when she entered the bedroom. "John, what the hell is going on? What are you doing?" She just stood there while I continued to pack. All I took were underwear, shoes, and my work clothes. "Are you going to answer me? What happened? Just because you had a bad day at work is no reason to leave. I'm assuming you're leaving because you're packing." "Answer me, damn it! I'm your wife. You're supposed to share that with me." I paused for a moment and looked in her direction. She knew not to interrupt me or try to speed up my speech. "I didn't work in Allentown today." There was no hesitation or stuttering. It was a simple sentence, but I said it perfectly. Amanda stood silent, waiting for me to continue. I finished packing and stopped again. "I was working in York today." It was another short, simple sentence, and it sounded perfect too, slow and cold-blooded. As I was getting my shoes out of the closet, I noticed my wife quietly leave the room. She didn't say anything. She was sitting on the living room couch as I headed for the front door. It only took me a moment to put my work boots back on. I looked back one more time before I left. Her eyes were moist, but she didn't cry as she watched me walk out the door. She gave no explanation or apology. I wasn't far from Hagerstown when my cell phone rang. Under the circumstances, I think I would have had an easier time communicating if I had learned how to send text messages, but just using a cell phone was an accomplishment for me. That was Colleen. "Hey, Dad, where are you?" "Hi, Hagerstown. Yeah." "Mom told us you left, and I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." "Dad, is there anything you want me to do? Is there anything I can do to help?" "No." It's hard to have a long dialogue with someone when the words don't come out right. There were a million things I wanted to say to my daughter, but didn't feel strong enough to say. Mom told Brenda and me what had happened. She didn't go into much detail, but we had both known for a long time. "I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad you finally found out." "You and Brenda knew about it?" "For about 3 years now." I feel stupid. "Don't, Dad, don't do this to yourself. You're a good father and a good husband. Don't ever think otherwise." I didn't answer her. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to talk anymore. It was too much to digest at once. My stomach was churning, but I wasn't hungry. "Daddy? Daddy? Are you there? Are you okay?" "I'll be fine. By the way, I paid your school tuition for you. You're ready to get in." "I don't care about that. I care about you." "Thank you, sweetie. I gotta go." I turned my phone off without giving her a chance to say anything else. I was having dinner at Cracker Barrel in Harrisonburg when I noticed a small ad for a job opening for a facilities maintenance manager with an emphasis on air conditioning and heating. After a short phone call, I had an interview scheduled for the next morning. I had never actually had an interview for any job before, so I was a little nervous. My obvious speech impediment didn't help my confidence. If I could do it, great. If not, nothing was lost. Oak Brook Meadows was a small church-affiliated shelter for the elderly. It was old and looked like it had been added to several times. There was no structure or organization to the entire facility. It was a mishmash of buildings that desperately needed help. "Good morning. You must be Mr. Tyson. My name's Don Watson. Do you mind if I call you John?" "That's all right." We shook hands and I sat down. Over the next 30 minutes, Don Watson gave me a complete history lesson on Oak Brook Meadows and confirmed the complexity of the venture. My initial observation was about money. It was a non-profit organization, and they had funding problems to keep it open. Over 100 retired seniors lived there as long as they could maintain their ability to work. When they became too sick or too old to care for themselves, they were legally transferred to a state facility. The cost of outsourcing all repairs and maintenance was so burdensome on their budget that they considered closing the entire facility. Hiring a full-time maintenance manager was a last desperate attempt. So far, they hadn't had much luck. The salary they were offering was really bad. The advantage was the use of a small apartment in the basement of the main building and meals in the community dining room. It took me 3 days to make the apartment habitable. The meals were delicious and convenient. It seemed like everything was going to be fine. I was happy. There was a fully equipped workshop with a bunch of assorted manuals and spare parts. Air conditioning and heating didn't seem to be a problem, but I had no experience with things like dishwashers, stoves, and built-in refrigeration. The plumbing difficulties threw me off, but I got through them. I spent an entire weekend researching the facility's insurance policies. Things went pretty slow at first. After dealing with a few things that needed immediate repair, I did a complete inventory of items that required or would require some maintenance. I tried to balance things out a bit so that I could combine a few simple jobs with more complex ones. This would make the day-to-day work a little easier. Of course, the critical problems were prioritized. It only took a few weeks to get used to a comfortable routine. I took care of business during the day and took care of making my new home livable at night. I kept my cell phone charged, but turned off. I had a landline phone for work and an old Windows 7 computer that I had set up to keep up with maintenance. Don was happy with my work, and I was happy with the situation as a whole. Life was good. It had been over 3 months since I had left. I decided to call Colleen on her birthday. It was my first contact since I left. I was surprised that no one had tried to contact me, and depressed that no one cared enough to try. Of course, my phone had been off for most of that time. "Colleen, it's Dad. Happy birthday. Dad, it's so good to hear from you. Your phone was off. Where are you and what are you doing? I was worried about you." "Slow down. One question at a time. I'm fine. I have a DD job and a place to live. I'm more worried about how you're doing." "School's good. I live in a dorm room with 2 other girls. I've been sticking to my meal plan instead of going home to eat. I have a part-time job at a diner near campus." "Do you need anything?" "No, I'm fine. Is everything else okay?" "No, not really. Mom's pretty depressed, of course. She told Brenda and me what happened. I don't think she's sorry for what she did, but she's sorry she got caught. She got a job at Zinn's Diner, but I don't think she makes enough to keep house. She sold all your tools and junk from the garage and is selling off the furniture. Last time I talked to her, she said she was going to go to the bank about the mortgage payments. I think she's going to repossess the house." "It's a shame. It was a nice house." "Oh, by the way, Brenda's missing. A few weeks after you left, Brenda and Mom had a big fight. In case you didn't know, you're not Brenda's biological father. It's some guy from Gettysburg named Samuelson. I think that's the guy she was dating the day you found out. Anyway, Brenda left and sent a postcard from San Francisco. It's like I'm the cause of so much misery." "No, you're not, Dad. Mom brought this all on herself." "Colleen, give me your P address. I'll send you a power of attorney to make it easier for your mother to get rid of the house." "You don't have to do that, but it would be easier for Mom." The staff did not eat with the Oak Brook Meadows residents. They ate a little later and in a separate part of the dining room. By this time, I had made friends with the other staff and a few of the residents. I don't know why I thought of them as inmates, but it seemed appropriate. Ivy James soon became a regular at my dining room table. Ivy was in charge of the laundry at the institution. In fact, she was the facility's laundress. Most of the residents did their own laundry in the community laundry room, which I also had to take care of. If there was a way to mess up the washer or dryer, they found it quickly. Ivy was in her late 40s or so. She wasn't a dazzling beauty, but she wasn't a crocodile either. I learned that she was single and had never been married. She worked hard and was in pretty good shape as far as I could tell. She lived with her parents and they would drop her off and pick her up from work. What set her apart from everyone else and made me sympathetic was that she was deaf. In no time, I found myself spending more and more time with Ivy. She had a small notebook on a strap around her neck and used it when needed. Usually, she got along just fine without it. She was a pretty good lip reader, and for some reason, I didn't stutter when I was with her. I didn't even have to enunciate the words. I could just say them with just my lips. It calmed me down a bit. She never made me feel self-conscious about my affliction. Our relationship improved when she invited me to spend Thanksgiving with her family. Her parents and sister were not hearing impaired. Her mother and sister were both proficient in English. Her father had a good-natured attitude, but relied on two women to translate for him. They quickly noticed my stuttering and tried to guide the conversation so that I could minimize the amount of talking but still feel included. Overall, it was a good experience. Ivy and I became close. The Virginia School for the Deaf was 30 minutes away in Stonington. I had no problem signing up for evening English classes even in the middle of the semester. I didn't say anything to Ivy, but she realized something was going on when I started paying more attention to her gesticulations at different times. When I finally told her, she brightened up and offered to stay up late to help me with my homework. The school explained that it would probably take about 2 years to become proficient enough to hold a simple conversation, but I had to start somewhere, and I was motivated. The work was good. I had a personal life of sorts, but I wasn't really dating anyone. Every day, the pain I was feeling over the breakup of my marriage was lessening more and more. Colleen called and told me she was coming over for Christmas. She didn't ask me, she told me. How could I say no? Oakbrook Meadows had several available guest rooms, so I had no trouble reserving one for her. I was a little worried about her meeting Ivy, but it wasn't necessary. As soon as Colleen realized Ivy was deaf, she started gesturing. She wasn't very good at it, but good enough that the two of them could have long conversations without me. Colleen took 2 courses when she was still in high school and was able to get advanced placement when she went to college. Of course, dear old Dad didn't know anything about it. It seems she had already decided to major in special education at Kutztown. We ended up spending most of Christmas vacation with Ivy and her parents. Of course, I still had to do some remodeling. Everything seemed to keep falling apart, even though it was a holiday. Colleen didn't seem to mind that I had to leave her sometimes. I was a little embarrassed when Ivy kissed me under the mistletoe, but Colleen seemed to enjoy my discomfort. Before I left, Colleen casually mentioned that she thought Amanda was still in touch with Jeff Samuelson. It wasn't something she said to Colleen, just little hints and things she casually said or referred to. Colleen got the feeling that she was planning something that was going to happen in the future and was looking forward to it. 2 weeks later, I was satisfied. She hadn't asked for anything. She just wanted a divorce. I signed everything and sent it back to her attorney. There was only one thing bothering me. I was furious. She had used me, taken advantage of me, and then felt she could just throw me away when she didn't need me anymore. It was wrong. I know. I left her and opened that door. It still wasn't right, and I wanted to find some kind of balance. I was happy with my new life, and normally I should have just accepted my good fortune and moved on. I couldn't do that. Ivy didn't gloat when I told her about the divorce, but it was obvious that her mood had improved a bit. She was still the same as before, but better. My nights were sleepless as I kept thinking about being used. My pride was destroyed. She screwed up, and I was the one who was hurt. I know that's how things usually go, but I still didn't like it. I needed to calm down. It was Monday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I was drinking coffee at the Ugly Mug Cafe in Gettysburg, waiting for Jeff Samuelson to leave for work. He left the house at 7 a.m., just as I arrived. I dressed up a bit for my meeting with Mrs. Samuelson because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. I had no idea what I was going to say to her when I rang the doorbell. Even though it was still early, she was already dressed. I was afraid she'd be in pajamas or a robe. "Yes, may I help you?" "Mrs. Samuelson, My name is John Tyson. I was hoping I could take up a minute of your time. Are you selling something, Mr. Tyson? I don't think we'd be interested. No, ma'am. This is a private business concerning your husband and my wife. She stood silent, deep in thought. I couldn't tell if she was going to ask me to leave or invite me in. Your wife's name wouldn't happen to be Amanda, would it? Isn't it? Yes, ma'am. Please come in, Mr. Tyson. We really need to talk. Marie Samuelson and I spent the next 2 hours together. As I left to go home, I wasn't sure if I felt better or worse. She had suspected something for several years, but had never been able to come up with anything concrete. Most of the time, she acted calm and stoic until I told her about Brenda. Her whole demeanor changed. It was then that I decided it was time to leave. My job was done. The first thing I did when I got back was tell Ivy everything. I couldn't start a relationship with her if we had secrets. She seemed to understand and took a little extra time to try and comfort me. Things were back to normal. Ivy and I looked after the house. We were too old to start our own family, but Ivy was interested in either foster care or adoption. We researched the possibilities and found that our chances of adopting hearing-impaired children were pretty high. The people at Staunton would be more than happy to help us. Dad, it's Colleen. I wasn't expecting a call from my daughter in the middle of the night. Hi. Is everything okay? Not really, but you have nothing to worry about. I'm at Baptist Hospital in York. My mom got shot. She's okay, but I felt like I should call you. Okay. Now you've got my attention. What the hell happened? What I can piece together is that Mom and Mr. Samuelson were having dinner at Cracker Barrel when Mrs. Samuelson walked in and discharged a .22 caliber revolver at them. All the shots missed except one that just grazed Mom in the right arm. It was not serious, but medical attention was required. She's going to be discharged in a couple hours. I'll stick around and then I'll take her home. What happened to her boyfriend? He didn't get a scratch, but he suddenly disappeared before the cops got there. He just left Mom stranded. Mrs. Samuelson sat in a chair and calmly waited for the police to arrive. I don't suppose there's any reason for me to be there. No, I'm taking her home. I'll call you later. Oh, I forgot. Mom's really pissed that her boyfriend ran out on her. I've never seen her so pissed off. Thanks for calling. By the way, keep some time off in early April. Your dad's getting married. Congratulations. I'll be there, of course. Oh, I won't tell Mom. It would really crush her right now. See ya. Hanging up the phone, I thought I'd better tell Ivy something about the upcoming wedding. Epilogue. Thus ends the saga of a quiet, cold-blooded man. He bought a house and moved in with his new wife. They adopted 3 children and raised several more. Colleen took a job teaching at the Virginia School for the Deaf and married a year later. John continued to work at Oakbrook Meadows, but Ivy did not. Amanda is still working at the diner. Jeff Samuelson was never seen again. Life is good.